we had some questions here on injuries. So you're just recently coming off 2 of the bicep things. So you talked a little bit about the knee. So go into just injury history, how you've overcome them. You know, disclaimer, we're not doctors, physical therapists, all that other stuff. Just what have you found to work best with?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had aches and pains my whole life. You know, so like I remember being young and in middle school having low back pain. You know, I grew, so I had like Osgood-Schlatters and Sever's disease and whatever they called it in my heel. So I just always had like little tweaks and stuff like that, or just, you know, from growing and being active, playing sports, like there was always stuff along the lines there. Then I had the knee thing. The knee thing kind of caught me off guard. I don't really know what had caused it. I think a lot of people have meniscal tears and they don't really do much about them. I think it's very common. For me, it was just something that had affected me doing clean and jerks and squatting. I just felt this knee pain all the time. And I went, and then when I got looked at, they saw that there was a meniscus tear, so they cleaned it out. After that, I was fine and had no issues. Right now, it's just kind of dealing with different tendonitis, tendinopathy, trying to manage that through training your variables, you know, like volume, intensity, all that kind of stuff is kind of what I do there. And then, the bicep tear, I think, was the biggest one that I've had thus far, you know, and that was when I was with Juji Mufu and Eric Bugenhagen. I think there were a couple of variables that went into play there. One, I was pretty dehydrated. I had traveled for a long time. I was in a large calorie deficit. I was doing a pretty substantial cut that time. Another thing was I had always been doing curls because I was doing a lot more bodybuilding and hypertrophy style training, but we were going heavy on curls. And that was something I haven't really done, was go heavy on the barbell, or we were doing the preacher bar curls. And in my mind, when I was doing them, I think it was like 150 or something like that on the bar. I forget exactly how much weight, but I knew I could do more. Like I had like it came at me like, and I at least expected it when it had happened. Mm-hmm. You know, it was like, I went to curl, felt like these pops, put it down right away. And I remember I looked at the camera, I was like, I think I tore my bicep, and they were like in disbelief. So that was just super unfortunate. But I think with that, it came down to, you know, all the variables I had mentioned, and then also not specifically working heavy load with a bicep curl, like putting that much weight on the structure. And then the second one, I mean, you were the first guy I contacted, and that was like a kick in the nuts, man, because I had recovered from the bicep surgery. I still am. It was within a year. You know, I did my exercises, I trained around, all this stuff. Everything felt great. I had a really good prep. And my plan at this time, and this is why we kind of go back to the strongman question, is because I had this plan, you know, and then things kind of got derailed. So it's just trying to sit here and observe everything. Is I was doing a tune-up show in March to qualify me for nationals. I was going to do nationals as another tune-up just for fun, and then I was going to compete in OSG in November. So my prep went really great for this competition. I was smoking all the events. I had a blast, and I didn't tell anybody about this competition either. I was like, I'm going in, I'm going to have fun. Mm-hmm. Like I wanted to do this for me, as I, you know, should always be, but I wanted to do it because like, I just wanted to be a part of that community, you know, and I didn't want anybody to know, I didn't want any pressure from whatever. So I went and had a blast, you know, hooting and hollering for everybody. And then last rep of the last event, I'm loading a stone. And as I'm loading the stone, I just feel pop, the same exact feeling I felt when I tore my bicep. This time it was proximal up here in my shoulder. The first one was the distal. And I was just like, you got to be shitting me. Like that really just happened. And then, you know, I felt the ball tissue or the tendon kind of right there. But yeah, getting kind of back to your question is, you know, because I went from being a guy who did a lot of accessory work and focused on a lot of smaller, minute muscle groups, and then wanting to get really strong raw, or my raw strength increased a lot for strongman. So I started putting more volume into just compound lifts, and I decreased the volume in those smaller exercises. And I think, and you can piggyback on this, is like, I think there's got to be a balance somewhere in between there. Because if you just are focusing on these compound lifts all the time and you're not focusing on the other stuff, at some point, either something's got to give, or you become so specialized in something that you're kind of neglecting the benefits of being a little bit more well-rounded. And I think that had happened to me with when I switched gears and I put more time and emphasis into just strength training, and I took that away from doing certain stuff for, like I said, unilateral work, for example.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing a lot of that, or I wasn't focusing on like my rear delts as much, or just smaller muscle groups, for whatever you want to label it. And I think now I have this deeper appreciation of like putting more time and effort into that stuff, whether it be in off season or whether it be the whole time, just to kind of keep things a little bit healthier and more stable and prevent injury a little bit more.
Yeah. I think something that gets lost in the injury prevention conversations a lot is what I hear frequently is there's like no middle ground. It's like pain-free. Like what first of it, I mean, you've been training for a long period of time. Like, what the fuck is pain-free? Like, training is painful. You know that, right? So let's just, there's that factor, and so the definition of what pain is in this whole pain-free conversation is severely lacking, for one thing. And if you're training to compete or training to push personal goals and anything that's really bodybuilding type training non-competitively is probably the safest, because it's lower tempo, lighter weights, all the other stuff. Strength type stuff, there's what I see lost in the conversation. There's still going to be little tweaks here. Maybe the bicep tendonitis lights up a little bit. Maybe the tricep lights up, elbows light up just a little bit. Maybe a knee lights up a little bit. A lot of those things I don't think are avoidable, right? And a lot of people will say they are, but usually those are the people that aren't the ones that have actually done it or are doing it. Now they are, like you said, they are warning signs. You just don't ignore it. Now how you're going to go about working through it or around it will be based upon when the meet is, the competition is, whatever it is. So further, there's different strategies based upon where it is. I mean, it's stupid to 18 weeks out to try to work around something that just probably needs to be rested. But that, if you look at that whole pain-free type, no, that's never talked about, right? Which leads this big false misconception to all the people that may be listening that are, training seriously and training for meets or shows or whatever it's going to be, that my elbow should never hurt. My bicep tendon should never hurt. My shoulder should never hurt. My knee should never hurt. I should never, ever have a slight tweak, and that's kind of bullshit. That's part of that training hard. Now, if it's happening every week, there's a problem. You see what I'm talking about, where they make it, okay, shit's going to tear off or you're completely pain-free. But that's the impression that's put out there. Like, do this stuff or shit's going to tear off. You get what I'm saying? Or do this stuff or you're going to be crippled the rest of your life. And so I wonder, the younger people or the newer people coming into strength sports, if they even know that a lot of this shit just kind of comes with the territory. And granted, there's probably people that are going to say, oh, Dave, you're full of shit. They should never be that way. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll agree to disagree. Now let's just start talking to people who are actually doing it. And let's find the one that you're talking about. Right. And that's going to be honest, because I'm sure there's ones that will say, oh yeah, I never have, but then they sell, something that, a program or whatever to be able to not have that. So I think that's important to put out there, while at the same time, it's important to put out there the things that you're talking about. You have to do what you can to minimize, and at the very basic level, like, what injuries are the most common for strongman, or what injuries are the most common in powerlifting? Mass, Greg Knuckles, Stronger by Science, man, they have some amazing content stuff, that they've put out that breaks down, these are the most common injuries by, not just like guesswork, like seriously put the research and reviewed meta study and all this stuff to be able to come with this. That's a great guide to be able to say, holy shit, like half the people have lower back problems. Maybe I ought to put in stuff to combat that a little bit, and go that way. So the information's definitely out there for sure. I can go into injuries forever, but I don't want to. I get it, but that's what that's probably my biggest takeaway for today is that kind of that middle ground that
Yeah.
I think kind of gets lost.